This is fantastic. Okay, great, everybody, welcome. So now we're talking about something, and we teased it out a little bit actually in the last session, which I thought was interesting. Now we're talking about really a layer, sort of augmenting our normal streaming or video viewing experience. And so it's game on, esports, gaming, gambling, and OTT. And so that's a mouthful. It's a lot of things. But the genesis of this session was really about that lean forward, engaging, high CPMs, interactive, sometimes complementary, sometimes competitive with your normal sort of TV and video viewing experience. So let's do quick introductions. Jeff, you're first.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Brian. I appreciate everything going on today. Great. So Jeff Kowalski, Chief Revenue Officer at Esports Television, ESTV. We are the leading provider for 24/7 broadcasting of esports content across the globe. So at Esports TV, we have distribution over 40 platforms, the major ones on connected television, Samsung, Roku, Rakuten, and then the lifestyle ones as well, Tiki Live, Rad, and Glue. It's about 46 countries. Just onboarded India as the world's second largest populace last month. And we're rolling out our ESTV Plus app here before the holiday season. So it's exciting to champion this demo and bring esports content through all our partners in the verticals of academics, racing, even exclusive relationship with publishers like DCL and PUBG, which will be a fun topic for today in the intersection of gambling and their offering and their tournaments, as well as celebrity-based content with partners like the Ultimate Gaming League. So it's an exciting time, and we're glad that the 60-inch television on the wall just keeps getting bigger, and happy to bring this education and information to not only the esports enthusiasts out there, but also the parents and the families. So thanks for having me, Brian.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And Corey, thanks for joining us.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. My name is Corey Smith. I'm the Director of Live Operations for Activision Blizzard Esports. My purview is basically we run the tech stack for glass-to-glass broadcasting for Call of Duty and Overwatch League esports.
How do I join your team, Corey? That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's a lot of hard work, Brian.
I know. Okay, Bill, welcome.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Bill Drolet, SVP of Global Sales at Enthusiast Gaming. We reach about 300 million gamers globally across our YouTube channels, our websites, and our award-winning Team Luminosity esports franchise.
Awesome. Welcome, Bill. And Victor.
Hi, I'm Victor David from Epik, and I'm here to, I guess, talk about a little bit of more different perspective, which is how it can be, new ways to consume this content, via interconnectivity through metaverses. So at Epik, we focus on digital items, and we're the largest agency putting brands into video games. And now it's mostly going to NFTs and interconnectivity between all these different platforms. And streaming and consuming this content is like a new way for advertisers and content providers to get involved.
So different ways to monetize and build those communities. Okay, great. And Mark is returning as a speaker this year. Mark, intros.
It's good to be back. My name is Mark Phillip. I founded a company called Are You Watching This about 15 years ago. We've recently expanded with a spinoff called MetaBet, where we're focused on getting gambling data and using it as the glue between sports books that are desperate for new customers and media companies with tons of eyeballs, and building products, widgets, tiles, experiences that bring those two together.
Okay, great. So you have a different hat on this year, Mark. Thank you for that.
I do.
So let's talk a little bit about this. And there's a lot of different angles we can go. And the attendees know we've done a prep call to kind of wrestle it down to a few particular areas. So, Bill, I'm going to start with you. I mean, if you look at gamers, and by the way, I was surprised. I just saw data that said that gaming revenues dwarf, traditional, or just video in total. And I was just shocked by that. The amount of money that's being spent in this industry. But gamers consume most of their content playing or watching games. We look at what Netflix is doing now as a competitor to Fortnite, Call of Duty, and these other old channels. What is the new paradigm of the competition now that everybody's kind of jumping into each other's turf?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, gamers, when they're not gaming, their form of entertainment is watching huge content creators, whether it's on YouTube or on Twitch. When they're not, in their social network of playing Fortnite or Call of Duty, they're actually watching the best creators because they're super entertained. And they want to get better. They're so competitive. They're very complex games, but they also need to be entertained. So they're definitely a hard to reach audience because they're not spending a ton of time on broadcast TV or Facebook. They're really spending their time, on a couple of platforms. So the amount of money being spent, I think you're seeing it's not only in ad revenue, but it's in what they're paying to play, to buy the latest gun or the latest skin. So it's a very hyper engaged audience that's really consuming content at a different level.
So I have 3 sons, and we control behavior by Xbox privileges. It's very effective. Anybody that has kids knows that. And one of the things that I find is I'll take away the Xbox, and then they're on YouTube, watching people play Fortnite or Twitch, and I'm like, really? And almost I would say even more time, watching other gamers. So that speaks to something about the community. Obviously, they're saying, Dad, I want to get better, but I think it's more than that. Who wants to talk to that? Like, what's driving that behavior?
I think, if you want to jump off on Call of Duty, I mean, I think that's a good example of, I look at it. My nephew was a senior in college when the pandemic hit, and he got sent home at spring break, and he basically spent the next 6 months playing Call of Duty with his 10 buddies from his soccer team in college because they could put the camera on, they could compete, give each other a hard time, have fun with it, and they felt connected, right? So I think it's really a social network at this standpoint.
And so now gaming isn't just gaming; it's a channel, it's streaming, right? And so Corey, you can speak to this operationally. You've maybe you can talk to your background, and now you need to be available, and all those sort of challenges you have are running like a traditional channel sort of apply now to the gaming world. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, during the course of our live shows, we're on the air anywhere from 8.5 to 10 hours, depending on how long the matches kind of run. And typically there'll be 8 teams that play for that day. And our tournaments typically start on like a Friday and then go through Sunday. So we basically are broadcasting on YouTube for a majority of all 3 of those days. But each one of those matches becomes, a VOD replay of some sort. For community to come back in, because we're not broadcasting in every time zone that's appropriate for everybody to stay up and watch, so to speak. So if we're live at 1 p.m., Pacific, that's 9, p.m. European time, right? Or London based time. So we're trying to broadcast to a global audience, but we're not always going to be there in the right time for them to watch. So we really look at their VOD profiles that, as the tournaments close and each one of those teams that file gets cut off, we see a lot of longevity on some of the VOD because people, to what Bill was saying, they want to go back and they want to watch the pros and how they play because they want to learn and digest that information. It's very specific about how we pull stats from the game engine, give that back to the team so they can actually coach their players on the right placement of how they, either they modify their loadouts, how they do their positioning within the field of play as well. And they can kind of start to train their employees just like you would train any other traditional athlete. But it's watching VOD is very similar to the NFL when, the players are watching film, before the big game on Sunday. So,
and it's so fascinating, all the changes that are happening here. So Mark, in your world, if we look at, we've got the DraftKings and the FanDuels and so on, but then we have the Fubo TVs, right? And, adding in or announcing sports gambling. And we have Netflix. We already talked about adding gaming, sort of small foot with a big foot, but a small entry into that. Is this a larger trend? Are these outliers or is this a larger trend where you have sort of the world of, video and streaming, making big bets, so to speak, into this new world?
I think it's interesting because we talk about watching these VODs and watching games after they happen. And is that really so different than watching ESPN Classic I remember watching old Knicks games from 10, 15 years ago, and people ask me, what's going to happen? Why are you watching it again? Thinking about someone watching someone else play Minecraft doesn't feel so weird when you frame it in that way. I think Fubo is really interesting because they started as a really sports-focused OTT. Like, that was always their hook. We're going to give you the most sports out of anyone. So it really makes sense that they expand into gambling, and you see it with the acquisitions that they've made. But the big question has been, what's going to happen with Mickey Mouse? Is Disney going to dip their toe into something that culturally has always felt a little shady, felt a little bit illegal? And just in the past few days, we've been hearing a lot more from them saying that it's kind of inevitable, which is kind of what everyone sort of expected. So I think Fubo has really been a big push. Once ESPN decides, or I should say Disney decides that, our brand isn't going to keep gambling at arm's length, the rest of the organizations in that space, the rest of those competitors, folks like Fox, for example, with their Fox Bet, which is really, really early to market, they're running out of reasons not to jump in.
So, Jeff, let's pick that up. So there, Mark mentioned this might be a little bit shady. Brand safety is really important. It's a big thing right now. If you look at gambling, and is gambling safer or more risky than the sort of regular wagering system?
That's a great question. A lot of great points are being brought up as far as the maturation of the gaming market, right? The adoption of gaming, and in some ways the nuance between esports and gaming as well, right? From those who aspire to participate. I mean, we've all kind of been on a youth soccer field probably, and we've all probably tried to put the orange ball into a 10-foot hoop. And when that's not successful, to Bill and Corey's point, we want to see the experts do it. And so as the market matures, so too do the organizing bodies. Giving a bit of a shout out to one of our partners who produce out of Boise State, creating a great ecosystem for the collegiate participants, from production to gaming to the behind the scenes operations. And that's, partnered with Esports Tower, which kind of serves as this AAU training ground. So as a result, sure, we have kids participating, but, academics is a renewable demographic where, we've been into gaming now for a few years, and now they're starting to be professionals who have disposable income, who are starting to maybe have their own kids. And as a result, we kind of have this adoption of that normal gambling behavior. So to your question, is gambling any more risky? The most wagered sport in the world is actually tennis. And I think we've all seen the documentaries on, the match fixing in tennis and the human element that can lead to that. There's some great stuff with what Corey and his team do at Activision Blizzard, both at the software level, as far as, identifying bad actors, which the sports books too have a great incentive to weed those bad actors out as to not mess with their own model. And then I think we could all agree on this call that there is no community that has more integrity at times to the competition than gamers. We've seen the madness on social media of gamers calling out other gamers for cheating or, being nefarious with their activity. So the community itself through, it existing everywhere on social media, on Twitch, on YouTube, on Facebook, but also on your Roku TV and other destinations, you have that accountability within gaming. So I heard a funny point in just that, are we worried about our kids coming home from youth soccer and getting on their FanDuel app and placing a bet on MLS? Sure, we should be worried about that. And we shouldn't maybe wager on activities where kids themselves are participating. But as far as certain security measures, the more you peek behind the curtain, as far as the software and the analytics, it might actually be that right environment where the worlds can collide fruitfully.
Because it's trackable and you have tools to prevent that from happening, probably in some ways more than sort of in the real life world. So you mentioned a couple of things there. So let's talk about the money aspect here, Bill. And you shared, and you guys sort of play a dual role, right? Because you also have teams, right? Esports teams that you manage. And I think you throw out a number. You don't have to disclose who, but there's big money to be made here, right? My son said, when I grow up, I want to be a gamer. And he said that a few years ago. I'm like, son, come on. How do you make a living at that? Can you make a living at this?
Yeah. So you may have heard of Ninja, who's probably one of the most popular gamers. He actually launched with us at Team Luminosity, and we lost him a couple of years ago because Red Bull gave him $100 million contract to be exclusive to Red Bull. So the top streamers in the world are making, they're making NBA money, 20, 30, $40 million a year. And the majority of it comes from ads on YouTube and sponsorship, direct sponsorships in a lot of cases. So they are very authentic athletes, if you will. I mean, most of them perform really well at a particular game, and then they get a huge following across their social channels, and then brands are attracted to their influence over their audience. We work with XQC and Nick A30 and Chica all on the Luminosity roster. And when they unbox Samsung's latest curved monitor and play with it and talk to their fans, Samsung sells out, right? So their impact on brand sales is pretty impressive. But it's one really important thing for marketers. It's got to be authentic. Otherwise, gamers are going to call bullshit on it. So, when we talk to the world's largest marketers, we talk about engaging the audience in an authentic way, especially when you're using an influencer or an esports franchise. Otherwise, they're just not going to want to see a 30-second ad from Nike. They're going to want to see a brand integration. They're going to see authentic use of a product and an endorsement, and then we see great results.
So Victor, you work with clients, right, on some of this marketing and merchandising and different ways to kind of monetize this community. One of the things that really struck me was, I think it was Twitch actually was the number one destination for watching the election, right? And I was just astounded by that. I'm like, really? I thought they were supposed to be watching, video games or whatever, but no, they were, that was their community, right? And there's a way to build the community, and there's a way to, sort of monetize that, merchandise it. Maybe you can talk to that a little bit about when you work with your clients in this space. Definitely.
Twitch is where people are used to going. And I think all these conversations are all linked together, how everything has changed so much due to this. I think what's important to understand is the skill, right? So people understand the skill more because they can actually do it themselves. So when you understand that at a basic level, kids play the game. That's why they're super engaged. That's why they watch, follow esports athletes. That's why everything's all tied together. And then this is all tied into the new kind of like creator economy. Then these guys themselves can become athletes, or they can stream, or they can have an audience. So this really gives the foundation for the building blocks of anybody being able to really be highly more engaged in being a part of these communities. And these are how these communities grow. And Twitch obviously is a major hub for all of that. But what's interesting now is beyond Twitch and now these video games as they build out, obviously Blizzard knows this with, and big MMO RPGs and stuff like that. This is now the transition where everything is becoming much more meta. And now, people are now going to not just watch on Twitch. People may be inside of a metaverse, watching streams inside of a metaverse of people playing games inside that exact same metaverse. So this is how everything is kind of going. And but people don't get how it can get so deep. Yeah. Level upon level upon level until they understand that every person that's participating is so highly engaged because they can actually do these activities too. They're actually super into it. They know every nuance of the skill that's required, which is very different. Whereas you watch sports, I love sports. I'm a fantasy sports addict. I love fantasy sports, but I could never play basketball. I could never play football. I could never play these professional sports, but all these, and not just that, I could never become a commentator. I could never become Stephen A. Smith. I could never become all these people. All these people that are part of these communities, they can become casters. They can somehow get really engaged in that community, which really draws them in. And I think that's really where the opportunity is.
It's a huge opportunity
to get involved.
Was that movie where you're like, a dream within a dream within a dream? I can't remember.
Inception. Yeah,
it's like Inception. Right, blows my mind. So Corey, you've got the challenge to be able to support all of this operationally. We're talking about really pushing the envelope technically here. How do you at Activision Blizzard even wrap your arms around the concept of a metaverse and supporting this community?
Well, for us, our primary priority is to make a great show, right? If you can't consume the show just as it is on TV or YouTube, in this case, then you can't really apply these other pieces to it and expand the experience because you're not doing any of it well at that point, right? So we kind of take the approach of like, hey, we would like to go investigate this, whether it's an augmented reality or virtual reality kind of thing. Maybe we do some two-way interactive kind of thing that changes the narrative of the show, so to speak. Getting participation from the audience, I think, is kind of our next frontier, so to speak. But we've talked about, taking a virtual reality camera in a slot in one of our games and basically use them as an influencer, as an in-combat reporter, so to speak. And so they can basically co-stream inside the game itself and actually be running around the map while the two teams are actively playing, similar like you would see kind of in real life with the embedded reporters. So it's things like that we're trying to kind of drive more interactive kind of feeling and nature of the show to kind of give this differential kind of viewing experience where it's like, that awe moment, like, oh my God, the guy is actually in the game running around with the rest of the teams. It's not just you're spectating one team and another team. You're in the middle of all the action, so to speak. So that could give a different parallel to the viewing experience. And, so it's tough to come up with these things that are going to like catch fire, like the gambling piece. For us, like until a lot of our tools improve to kind of clean the community up a bit, I'm not sure that there's going to be a way for us to kind of really go down the gambling route, because as soon as you lose your integrity with the sports books, then you're pretty much done. When you start putting real money on the line from a gambling perspective, I mean, it's one thing to in-game incentives and that kind of thing, but once you have real cash on the line, then it becomes a completely different ballgame.
Yeah. It's funny because, we're all avatars at some level, right? But that whole idea of the game within the game, the dream within the dream, it does blow my mind. But there's a real impact here. I remember the first time my son asked me for my credit card to buy something, video game related. I'm like, oh, what are you can buy a new game? Let me look at it. What's rated, whatever. No, it was to buy credits to buy a skin. And I'm like, what's that? Well, I can, I can get this new, suit or something like that. I'm like, oh, is that like a special weapon? It gives you, whatever. No, it just looks different. I'm like, really? I'm spending money for that? So it's a whole new economy, really.
Oh, it totally is. The microtransactions built in the games these days, whether it's PUBG, Fortnite, Overwatch, it doesn't really matter what it happens to be. It's the whole loot crate, like you buying stuff in Rocket League and buying stuff in Roblox. Like, I don't know how much money my kids have spent, but it's been a mint in just like this digital merchandise. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of, inflection of, how do we turn this into NFT type stuff and actually make art out of it? Okay.
So you mentioned merchandising, we're talking about the core broadcast, the core program. We're talking about the core sport, and then we're talking to layers around that. What are some cool ideas around monetizing this? Obviously, in addition to, gambling and sponsorships and everything else. Anybody have some ideas there that they want to throw out?
Yeah, I think we're about to see a really dynamic change with this popularity of NFTs. It's very ripe for the gaming audience with tokenization, with all the IP out there that can be rendered and created as a customer service layer or as a prize or a skill level reward. We're seeing this. You probably see in the press. There's all sorts of partnerships right now with cryptography companies that can create NFTs. And gamers, like, for example, you're buying a gun for Fortnite, you got the charge on your credit card for $8.99, and then your kid's done with the gun and it's over, right? Well, if that's an NFT, that can go back into a marketplace and that could be sold for $14, and then you could get your money back and make some money. So I think monetization with NFTs and with cryptography is going to accelerate over the next 18 months at a very rapid pace.
NFTs. Anybody else having go ahead, Victor?
I'm super glad you guys know exactly what's going on. That's exactly what we do. So we work with AAA game companies and we NFT for them, and we also work with brands, and that's kind of how we build interoperability between these metaverses, and that's exactly where it's going. Basically, the future of all consumer purchases, a large portion of it is now going to be digital. All the kids, like you mentioned, are now buying things. And to them, that's no different than buying, a purple t-shirt in real life. They're getting the skin. That's where they're spending their time. And we've been finding this is slowly been transitioning. And, NFTs obviously popped off in the very beginning because of art and the creator economy. But as we deal with brands and as they're coming in and as game companies are really taking this on, these are becoming the biggest places where the NFT transactions are going to happen. And not just that, all these massive metaverses. And then where we come in as well is interoperability between these metaverses. So how do the users not, because what makes NFTs different is, users get to own these items. Now, what does that mean? Sure, the content is created by the game companies, which they have the rights to. I mean, they did create this content. But what does this mean to the user? They can keep it as kind of like their own trophy case, think of it like that. But then as you build more interconnectivity between metaverses, then you can actually have the ability to move these items between metaverses. So as you build up your own collection of items, and as long as the metaverses can talk to each other, then, this hat that you wear in this metaverse, which is more like a fantasy game, looks more like, a silver helmet. But you go to this Western game, it's a cowboy hat. That's the kind of way that these digital items are going to morph into. And that's kind of going to be the trend for consumers to be purchasing this. And these are all the kids that are all buying this stuff nowadays.
So, Victor, are you saying that I'll be able to take my Fortnite gun and move it over to Call of Duty?
Well, eventually, that's always been the total dream, but it's really hard to do. But I think what's going to happen more initially is first start with the ownership aspect, where if that game ever disappears overnight or if it ever fades away into darkness, what happens now as a gamer like myself, those items are gone, which is pretty sad. It doesn't mean that I want to be able to own it and do whatever I want with it. It just means that even that representation of that item is gone. And that's a very sad thing. And as more and more gamers grow up, first of all, I think the most important thing is, the true ownership, because when you get decentralization with these items and you can actually NFT it, then you can kind of get permanent ownership of that item. Once you kind of get that first, it doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want with it. Sure, it exists within that game, let's say Blizzard, right? And that's great. No one's saying that, the game has to exist without the item, but you'd like to actually be able to own the item. And if the game doesn't exist anymore, still be able to look at it, do whatever you want with it. Then the next thing would be then the interoperability. Then that would be like, bringing that across. Now, what does that look like? It's really tough because there's so many games out there. But I think it's the idea that one day that you could have it represented differently, interpreted, maybe the future of where this is going.
So this is all sort of overwhelming. There's so many choices out there. We've had this conversation throughout the day with some of our, video focused OTT apps and streaming services and so on. Mark, if you look at so many games out there too, there's so many different options, so many different betting options. How do we avoid overwhelming the consumer with choices?
Sure. I mean, I think you take a look at Twitch and you log in and let's say you just want to watch something, but you're not sure what you want to watch. You're presented with whatever is the most popular at that moment. Not exactly what's best or what's most interesting, just what the masses are watching at that moment. And the idea of having almost a red zone channel, but for Twitch, the ability to show the most compelling thing going on, even if it's a game that you may not understand or may not be familiar with or may not even play, but it's compelling and interesting. I think that level of curation is inevitable. What would Netflix be if there was no curation? If it was just a dictionary of things and you had to go choose your genre and then go A to Z, it's hard to imagine Netflix becoming what it is now if that curation wasn't baked in from the start. But I kind of want to go back a couple minutes because I feel like the emperor has no clothes. I am not on board with the NFT bandwagon, and full power to everyone that is. But I want to raise a hand and just say that I think that there's a lot of exuberance, and whether it is irrational or not, who knows? I think that's the most exciting thing about technology as a whole. We don't know what's going to happen in 6 to 9 to 12 months. But I do think that, especially when it comes to kids and your credit card, Brian, I think it's important to have a little bit of restraint.
So, Mark, I hope you don't mind. I turned this panel into an NFT. I'm going to try to monetize it.
I'll be the first to purchase it.
So I don't know what it's worth, but we'll test out the market. Victor, can you help me with that?
Absolutely. We can mint it. We can put it in the best marketplace. We have a marketplace ourselves. No problem.
Well, I think it's interesting on NFTs, like McDonald's just created an NFT for the McRib. And if you guys know, McRib has a community that goes crazy to get that sandwich. And McDonald's created the scarcity, and they buy pork bellies when they're the cheapest. And then they make it a 3-week event 4 times a year where you can get the sandwich. So they created that scarcity, and they created a fan community for that sandwich. And now they're testing an NFT where you're a big McRib lover and you've got one of the first NFTs in 10 years that think could be worth, millions of dollars, because there's a whole community that loves that sandwich. Right. So I think you're going to see some brands experimenting where they have an IP, an idea, where they've got a community, right? Gaming's all about communities. There's Call of Duty communities, Fortnite communities, all these different communities. They all do things differently. And like the idea of having a red zone on Twitch, I think is a spectacular idea on popularity. And I think the NFTs, the gaming audience is going to adopt faster than any other audience because of the complexity of gaming, the authenticity, and then wanting to, be that early adopter. So I think it's an unbelievable frontier right in front of us.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I have to agree with Mark though on this. There's one perspective on the influencer economy, right, and how that drives grassroots adoption. But being at the OTT Executive Summit, right, this platform and the whole OTT marketplace has expanded because advertisers and brands and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, have finally decided that this is an acceptable place to reach that target consumer. So, back in the day, I think if we did a case study in the 1990s, how does baseball feel about the NFL, feel about the NBA? They would look at themselves as competitors. And now they realize that they're not, right? The personality sharing in that overall sports ecosystem is only a result of its maturity. So as what's going to drive the capital that each of our businesses can operate on is the infusion of those dollars through those big budgets.
Okay,
and
so
finish
your
the
thoughts.
last thing about NFTs is I hope everyone is ready for them to be securities, that they're going to be regulated, because we all know what high-priced art can do in an economy, and whose hands it can move between, and what it can be used for, either properly or nefariously for. And we've seen the same things happen in crypto. So, I think that's what the entire market should be ready for, is regulation over NFTs and securities.
Yeah, and wait till we have government, cryptocurrencies that are heavily regulated. That's a different side topic. I want to get back to the topic at hand, which is OTT and this world of esports and gaming, gambling and interactivity. How much of this is a parallel, investment of time for consumers? How much is it complementary? Is it competitive or complementary? And where do you see that trend going into the future? And I want you to speak to our, TV video executive audience. Like what lessons should they learn from this? Are you guys all a threat to them, or are there great partnerships in the future?
I think it's a world of partnerships ahead of us. I really do. I think esports is already on sports books. I think that's a very critical part for people to realize. Pinnacle Sportsbook, it's a great operation. They have CSGO. I think they work with some of Corey's titles as well. Dota, a lot of tournaments and competitive, basis are being wagered on as we speak. I think it's exactly great that, ESPN expanded it in ESPN Plus. If you look at one of the questions that was there about Venn, there's a very interesting answer to that, be taking Fox Sports versus ESPN. That would be probably an applicable case study. But I think what we've learned over the last 5 years is that consumers are everywhere. They're not just one place. They're not just one screen. They're on their screen while they're on their laptop, while they're on their phone, while the TVs on the wall are still getting bigger. And I think that's pretty interesting. So I think there's great compliments ahead.
So you see complementary, and interesting you mentioned the big screen TV, because in another session we talked about movement towards mobile and these little devices, but gaming and this sort of shared experience it's better on a big screen. So let's just go around the horn. Same question: competitive or complementary? Corey.
Complementary for sure. So, Jeff mentioned ESPN Plus. This is an opportunity for a lot of the major broadcasters to expand basically their channel lineup when they don't have any way to expand the cable or downlink from satellite. So as they acquire more and more and more content, they can spin up these diginets like there's no tomorrow. There's no end to it as long as the bandwidth is there. So for a cable operator, at some point you have, a certain channel lineup, but you can't expand anywhere beyond that without making the shift to IP. And so you've seen some cable operators now shifting a lot of their set-top boxes to IP, because you're going to get a more expanded range of channels you can fit down the line, outside of that coax. But then you see ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, Hulu, all these other characters out there. And look at Netflix, a primary movie delivery company, and now they're getting into gaming. So they're kind of like playing both sides of the fence, but it's all a content play. So the more the shift goes to IP, the more content you can now create and put out there, because you get more of it anywhere. I don't have to be plugged into my cable service at home or satellite or whatever. It's all part of this mobile, always on kind of be anywhere experience.
And if I take one sort of takeaway from this conversation is content plus interactivity equals community, right? Correct. And there's something there. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this during the pandemic when all the major leagues all had to shut down. We saw, a lot of the daily fantasy sports companies and gambling companies outside of the U.S. Really start to lean in, because guess what? There was no NBA, right? There was no tennis to bet on. So esports has been well established and growing, but the awareness level, I think, really raised during the pandemic. And I do think it's complementary, especially when esports gets back into stadium play and the popularity continues to grow with the great competitive games that are out there. I think we're going to see, that inclusion, that we were just talking about. I think it's only complementary, and I think it's going to continue to grow.
So Mark, same question for you, but I'm going to give it a little spin. If you wanted your phone to ring after the session for either MetaBet or Are You Watching This, what media and entertainment organization would you want to be calling you?
Well, I think it's an interesting way to pick at what I was thinking about as well. I'm with everyone else. Mentoring, absolutely. But I think the bigger question is, if you're a league, if you're the owner of this content, whether you're the NFL or Activision Blizzard, are you okay with your rights being splintered out? We're getting used to finding things on certain channels. But if you look at European soccer, it's hard to keep track from week to week. Okay, is this EPL match on Peacock or is it on NBCSN? But wait, NBCSN is going away, so it's going to be on USA. Where can I find Bundesliga? Where can I find La Liga? And so I think from a league perspective, there's definitely a question of, I don't know that I want them all working together and complementary. I might just want all my rights in one spot, which I think makes the whole ESPN Plus maybe getting Sunday Ticket really, really fascinating, because that's really, everyone knows ESPN. Everyone knows the exact channel number to turn to get to ESPN. So I think going forward, OTT versus these guys versus legacy guys, absolutely complementary. But I think going forward, the question of, do I want the NFL reaching out to me? Do I want the team reaching out to me? I think it's interesting to think that LeBron James has more Instagram followers than the Lakers. Do I want a text from LeBron when a Lakers game gets exciting? I think it depends on where your fandom lies. And for some people, it's the league. For some people, it's a player. So I'm not sure what the best answer is for that.
Interesting. Okay. So Mark's open to several calls. LeBron, Victor, how about you? So how would you look at this horse race between the media and entertainment properties and the world that we're talking about here?
Yeah, it's complementary. I mean, it's, as everyone's been fighting over the attention economy for so long, it's really hard. The more ways that you can get in access to people is just better for everybody. I mean, it's really hard. People are so transient. The way technology moves so quickly now, even you look at these giant game companies. I mean, I love gaming. I've been gaming, super highly competitive, and they don't maybe last forever, right? I mean, that's always what happens. So you just need to be everywhere all the time, and I think together is better than like I said, I think it's complementary for sure.
Okay. So we're almost out of time here. We did answer a question for the record. Jeff answered it in his response. So that's great. So we'll save time there. I just want to go around the horn one more time, and this time make a prediction over the next 12 months in your world, some new innovation that's going to happen that you think will be impactful and change consumer behavior. And this time we'll go in reverse order, starting with you, Victor.
I think we talked about it earlier, the predominance of NFTs. I mean, that's what we do and what we focus on, and we see the growth of it as connecting into the metaverses. And it's a central part of the building blocks of the metaverse because NFTs inherently involve intellectual property, which is how we're involved with it as well from IP licensing standpoint. So when you get that involved with advertising, with marketing, with all these, digital merchandise, that's really going to be the next trend. And then, not just purchasing, these can be advertising, or these can be engagement metrics. NFTs can be used for all these kinds of things. So that's really the next trend.
Okay, awesome. Mark?
In 12 months, you'll be able to place a wager from inside ESPN's app. I think it's inevitable. And I think as we have big states like New York, California, Florida, Texas, all probably not in the next 12 months, but probably in the next 3 to 5. I think it's inevitable that sort of in-app easy wagering is going to become commonplace.
Okay, bold prediction. Okay, Bill, how about you?
Yeah, I see the NFT, like we're in it right now. I just think for two things. It's not only the tokenization that's already happening in gaming that it will take over, but it's almost like a VIP experience that it'll be leveraged for. Like if you want to have a backstage pass to a concert, to a gaming event, I think NFTs are going to be a vital part of that communication. And I think, in 12 months from now, you're going to see some winners and some losers, but you're going to see some amazing innovation leveraging that cryptography.
It's interesting because, scarcity creates value, and that's kind of what we're talking about with the NFTs. On the opposite side, we're talking about massive communities and all that engagement that we can bring to bear. Corey, how about you? What's your big prediction?
Yeah, I'll leave NFTs alone for the time being, just because that's a strange emerging place anyways. But I think the majority of the next 12 months is going to be really a continued expansion of the diginets that are out there. And you're going to see operators programming more content against that from a linear perspective, where now it's a drop-in, tune-in kind of event, and you have multiple channels in which to program. It makes it very lucrative, both from an ad revenue perspective. You can get more teams, essentially, even from the collegiate level, the D1 through D3, and major colleges across the country can now be on ESPN Plus 24 hours a day. The expansion of how we use the internet as broadcasters, I think, is going to go completely bonkers in the next 12 months, because everybody is seeing this natural trend of, hey, I can actually really do this over IP, and I can actually start winding down my SDI plants and get virtual 100%.
It is amazing how far we come in the technology. Great answer. Jeff, how about you? You're going to get last word.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Corey sitting in on some of our meetings as we will be launching ESTV Academics and ESTV Racing and all the other our practical diginets. I think what happened in the first part of this century, from 2000 to 2010, everyone picked their favorite phone, right? And BlackBerry had its day. I had a BlackBerry, but didn't succeed. And now people like, you're the blue text guy or the green text guy or gal, right? And now, in the last decade, everyone kind of picked their favorite social media app, right? Almost to the point where it's been quite delineated what social media platform you're on. My prediction is the next 10 years, everyone's going to pick their favorite CTV provider. You're going to be a Roku person. You might be a Samsung person. You might be an LG person. And if not even then, you're going to harness more towards your Hulus, your ESTVs pluses, your ESPN pluses. So we're excited to be playing in that field. As that gaming content hits the 60-inch, the 70-inch, and the 80-inch TV over the next coming years. I believe wagering will be there by the end of the century. There will be wagering and sports books adopting all forms of the formal leagues and competitive leagues with these publishers. And then I think it will be a great ground for harnessing AR, the NFTs, and everything else. And I think gaming can take a large credit for that, but also the OTT, CTV space. So that's where I think it's going to go.
Great answer. I think we're going to close on that. I'm grateful for all of your contributions to this panel. I'm grateful for our attendees, a lot of them sticking with us. I hope there's a lot. I learned a lot. There's a lot of great lessons. You guys are the tip of the spear in terms of where this industry is going. So, great insights, and I'm very grateful for that. Stick around because you've earned it. We're moving into our virtual cocktail reception. I'm going to need to text somebody to bring me a scotch, but because I can't get up. So that concludes this session. Game on. And thank you, guys. You're welcome to stick around if you'd like.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
everybody.
folks.
Appreciate it.
All right.